Well, hello and welcome to the Hope Report. I am Melissa Hooray. On today's show, take heed that no one deceives you. We're going to be spending time today with our friend and special guest, Dr. Andy Woods, and he has been coming on the show pretty much monthly. I always look forward to these visits from Andy and being able to pull together a lot of things that I want him to react to and give us his insight about. Today, Israel prophecy. We're also going to ask him about this alien UAP disclosure and this secret pastoral meeting that supposedly occurred, and even a letter or an email that he received from someone a couple of years ago letting him know that this was coming. So it's going to be really interesting tapping his brain about all of that. But before we get into it, I'd like to start with a couple of scripture verses, and I'm going to start here in 2 Thessalonians 2, verse 3. I'm sure Andy knows it well. Let no one deceive you by any means, for that day will not come unless the falling away comes first, and the man of sin is revealed, the son of perdition, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Do you not remember that when I was still with you, I told you these things? And now you know what is restraining, that he may be revealed in his own time. For the mystery of lawlessness is already at work. Only he who now restrains will do so until he is taken out of the way. So we know that we are in a time of massive deception, and it's only going to continue increasing until the time of the rapture, which is imminent, which could happen at any moment. But after that, people are going to be given over to a strong delusion. So we want to warn you. We want you to take heed that no one deceive you, and that you come to a saving belief and a trust in Jesus Christ. And that's our hope for each person listening today, is that if you have not already done that, you would take heed that that is the most important thing that you can do today. But there's no denying it. The prophetic time clock is on the second hand, and the rapture of the church is right at the door. Yet many continue living comfortably with blinders securely fastened, in denial to what the Bible warns is fast approaching. The signs are all around: unprecedented hatred of Israel, normalization of anti-Semitism, influencers high on pride and embracing Islam while rejecting Israel, even denying Israel's right to even exist. Wars, rumors of wars, a coalition of nations coming together to sign a treaty with the coming Antichrist and eventually attack Israel. It's just a matter of time. Signs, wonders, earthquakes, secret paranormal activity, documents released. Well, just wade through them, see what you think. Nothing to see here, or a harbinger of things to come. Stage setting, delusion sinking, apostasy rising, apathy increasing. Oh, another earthquake, another prophecy fulfilled, just another day, nothing to see here, nothing new under the sun. Will the world wake up or wait until it's too late? So Israel, war, aliens, and prophecy with Dr. Andy Woods on today's Hope Report. So let's bring in our good friend, Dr. Andy Woods. Hey, Andy.
Melissa. Yeah. Hi, Melissa. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. Always appreciate having you on the show. And I know you do many interviews. I can't keep up with you. You're just making the rounds. Everybody wants to have you on their show. So always grateful for that. And to also talk to you about these situations going on in the world that we're hearing a lot about. And I wanted to start with Israel. Just, Andy, I know that you see all these clips that circulate, and we have talked about these, how it seems that people have the same rhetoric, the same narrative, and they pull verses out of context and then they use them to build a case against Israel. I saw this reel yesterday, and it's basically two, I don't know if I should call them silly people, doctrinally unstable. It's one of your favorite phrases, but two people giving this old argument that we are all one in Christ. Now the church has taken over Israel. Let's watch this clip and then I'll have you react to it.
Who are God's chosen people?
Christians.
But what about Israel? I thought the Jews were God's chosen people.
Well, not all Israel is Israel. So what makes someone truly an Israelite?
Faith. Those who believe in the one true God, the God of Abraham, by faith. It has always been this way. Faith from first to last. Nothing has changed. No mode of salvation has changed. It has always been all about faith.
Jesus warns the Pharisees, don't even dare to say that you are children of Abraham. You become a child of Abraham by faith and faith alone, not by physical descent.
Because Abraham had 2 children, right? He had Ishmael and Isaac.
But one was the child of faith in God's promises, and the other was a child of the flesh. So even in the Old Testament, they weren't saved by following the law. That is a complete misconception. They have always been saved by faith.
And no one is saved by virtue of who their parents are in an earthly sense. We're not saved through our flesh. We're saved through being reborn in our spirit of God. But Josh, isn't this just replacement theology?
No, Tatiana, it's fulfillment theology. The church is the fulfillment of what Israel was always supposed to be. They were always supposed to be a light to the nations. They were always supposed to be bringing Gentiles in to worship the one true God. But they got a little selfish with it and didn't want to share.
And look, all throughout the Old Testament, Gentiles are God's people. Look at Melchizedek, a king and a priest to God the Most High. He was a Gentile. This was before the Levitical order. Look at Ruth. She is a virtuous woman. And Proverbs says, who can even find one of those? And she was not an Israelite, but she was an Israelite. She is an Israelite. She is in heaven by faith. So no, the church doesn't replace Israel. The church fulfills Israel. And Israel is the church. Like, it is the same thing. Nothing has changed. There is no separate mode of salvation for a certain ethnic group of people. God does not show favoritism.
Sorry, that was so long. And I didn't realize it was so long. And I know there's a lot we could talk about there. But as I was watching it, I thought, this makes me feel so hopeless because you hear this day after day. And the thing I wanted to ask you about is, what people are so committed to making others believe is that, no, we're not anti-Semitic. We're not into replacement theology. We reject that. We do believe there's some future for Israel, which is, being part of the church. That's the only thing it seems they think Israel can do. But talk about this misconception that if we say fulfillment theology, like they're saying, then that's somehow different than replacement theology.
Well, I mean, I could bring a Big Mac home to eat and through the McDonald's drive-through, and I could get home and I could call it something from Burger King if I want to, but it doesn't change its meaning. I mean, a Big Mac is a Big Mac. It didn't come from Burger King. It came from McDonald's. So, just changing the name of something doesn't change the concept. And I guess they think that if you just don't use the word replacement theology, which I guess has a bad stereotype, thankfully, the real meaning of this, root meaning of the word is supersessionism. The church has superseded Israel. But I guess if they think they can call it, I don't know, enlargement theology, I've heard that term used, fulfillment theology, realized eschatology. I mean, whatever they're doing, it's still the same thing. They're taking commitments that God has made to the physical descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and they're transferring them with no biblical permission whatsoever, to another group of people, the predominantly Gentile church, which if God can do that, then you can't trust anything he has to say. So I guess that's what I would say about this nomenclature that they're using. And there's so many things to, react to in that video.
Yeah, there's too many to spend an hour doing that. That little reel had 58,000 views. And the majority of the comments were, amen, you're right. Why does Israel think they're chosen? The Bible is clear. They take Galatians 3 and say, we are all one. There is no distinction between Jew and Gentile, slave and free. The way that we are saved, of course, is by faith. But then that doesn't cancel the rest of the covenant. And the part about Ruth being part of, Ruth being a Moabite woman, and then becoming, following the God of Naomi, and, I'm going to follow your God. I don't know. This is what I want to know. I feel overwhelmed when I hear these things. Is there a way to dismantle these arguments, or just something that helps people think, this doesn't make any rational sense, that everlasting means everlasting. The covenants were made with Israel. Why is that so difficult for people to understand? Or are they just blinded?
Well, Ruth never became Israel, even though she was a Moabitess that came under under her mother-in-law, Naomi. Your God will be my God. Your people will be my people. She never became Israel. There's a name for people like Ruth. The New Testament calls them proselytes.
Proselytes.
Yeah. You go through the book of Acts, you'll see proselytes mentioned over and over again, which would be unnecessary. And sometimes they're called God-fearing Greeks, depending on where they came from. But that nomenclature would be unnecessary if Ruth and all Gentiles just got swallowed up into Israel. So, what is Israel? Israel has a meaning. It's a technical meaning. It always means the same thing every time it's used. It refers to the physical descendants of not just Abraham, not just Isaac, but Jacob. And if someone's ethnic lineage is connected there, then they are Israel. Everyone else is not Israeli, non-Hebraic. So when it talks about, not all Israel is Israel, what Paul is dealing with in Romans 9, verse 6, Romans 2, verses 28 and 29, I noticed they quoted, I think it was John the Baptist. Was it not in Matthew 3, say not to yourselves, we're the children of Abraham. God is able to raise up stones, called the children of Abraham. What it's dealing with is this: when God fulfills his covenantal promises with Israel, which he has to do because he's sworn himself to do that in the Old Testament Abrahamic covenant. When God finally fulfills all of that, it's not going to just be through Israel. It's going to be through believing Israel. And that's what Paul's dealing with in Romans 9:6, Romans 2:28 and 29. And, you notice that they never quote any Old Testament passages, other than the Ruth story. I couldn't really hear any Old Testament passages, but if they were to interpret the New Testament in light of what the Old Testament already says, instead of taking the New Testament and using it to rewrite the Old Testament, which is what these two were doing, they would have read Zechariah 13, verses 8 and 9, where God is very clear that 2/3 of Israel will be cut off in unbelief in the events of the tribulation period. And they would have read Ezekiel 20, verses 33 through 38, where God is going to, the Jews are going to pass under the shepherd's rod and the unbelievers are going to be purged off. And so they would understand what Paul's talking about in Romans 9, verse 6, Romans 2, 28 and 29, that he's not just going to fulfill his promises through Israel, he's going to fulfill his promises through believing Israel.
Right.
And I go ahead.
I was just going to say, my friend who's a Messianic Jew and I were talking about this, and it sounds like what you're saying is that the tribulation time is going to be, where national Israel goes through the time of Jacob's trouble, the final 7 years, to bring that remnant to faith. So are you saying that's what that means? Or, they're not all Israel who are of Israel, because unbelievers will be, sifted, Zechariah 13:8, and then the believing remnant that is what that means, correct? Those
Correct.
that come through the tribulation to believe?
Yeah, and that's factoring in all the covenants, not just the Abrahamic, but the Mosaic, which gives blessings for obedience. So it's like they don't really understand how these covenants work, and they're just reading the New Testament as if, to quote Andy Stanley, as if it was unhitched from the Old Testament. And they're coming up with all these interpretations that don't run akin with the New Testament. They, akin with the Old Testament, I should say, but outright change it. And they're trying to make it sound like anybody who believes is Israel. Well, that's not what the Bible says. Of course, faith is the dominant principle with God, but I'm a believing Gentile. I'm very happy to be a believing Gentile. I don't need to be Jewish. I have wonderful promises, but that doesn't make me Israel. And that doesn't mean that what's happening in my life now is some kind of eclipse for everything that God has planned and purpose for the nation of Israel. So that's why these kind of things, they frustrate me. They're sound bites. They're done very quickly. There's no in-depth exegesis, context. It's just throwing a bunch of verses around by some cutesy teeny boppers, it looks like, teenagers. And if people are getting their theology from that kind of stuff, we're in a world of trouble.
Yeah, woe unto us. And I'm sure as a scholar, that's got to just be a thorn in your side. And what you say, yeah, Ruth wasn't Jewish, right? I mean, she didn't become Jewish once she came to belief, is what you're saying. We're never, I think, we're never going to be ethnic Jews. We're not going to be party to those covenants that were made with Israel and ethnic Jews. And what you just said about the Mosaic covenant was very interesting. And I never really thought about that, because we know the Mosaic covenant is conditional. So Israel is in disobedience. They cannot be possessors. They cannot be enjoyers, I guess, is the way you say it, of their promises until they come to belief and receive the King of God's choosing. But it sounds like you're saying we're going back to a dispensation of the law in the final 7 years, and they will ultimately come into compliance with the Mosaic covenant. I never really thought about that at all. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, right now, when you look at all of the covenants, not just Abrahamic and the sub-covenants growing out of the Abrahamic, but the Mosaic, God cannot fulfill his national promises through them because they're not yet in belief. He can't cancel them, but he can't fulfill them. And the reason he can't cancel them is the Abrahamic covenant prevents the cancellation. And the reason he can't fulfill the covenants right now is the Mosaic covenant prevents a fulfillment of those covenants to a nation that's in unbelief. So at some point, all of this stuff has to come together. And that's the whole point of the Jacob's, time of Jacob's trouble, Jeremiah 30, verse 7, the 70th week of Daniel. Israel is going to be converted during that time period. Whatever unbelievers are on the earth at the time in Israel will be cut off. And the only thing that's left will be a believing remnant. And that's when you'll see the Mosaic harmonize with the Abrahamic. And now God's in a position to fulfill his word in and through that group. And the millennial kingdom can start, is basically what I'm trying to say. And so this is what's lacking in these kind of, soundbite propaganda pieces, as I'll call them, is there's never really an analysis given to some of the things I just talked about. It's just grab a verse. Remember, Satan quotes the Bible too.
Yeah.
Not everybody that quotes the Bible does it accurately. Grab a verse, put in a little music in the background, have some nice looking teenagers, kind of say it in a silly way, and voila, there we have our theology. And your average Christian takes that and absorbs it because they hear zero about this subject from the pulpit.
Right.
And so their pastors are not equipping them. And so this is where we are today, TikTok theology.
Exactly. That was just fantastic how you just explained that, because we know that all aspects of the covenants are going to be fulfilled. Land, seed, and blessing, the full extent of the land covenant, Jesus reigning on the Davidic throne from Jerusalem, blessing upon national Israel. I think a lot of people just cannot handle the idea of national Israel receiving a blessing because they're confused between secular and biblical Israel, and also the nature of the covenants. And you're not going to get that in a little TikTok clip. But it seems like people don't care, that they want, I believe, and I've heard you say this, the idea that Israel has a future, or the idea that there's a rapture and a tribulation, really messes with their worldview or their desire to build the kingdom. Do you think this is, well, the Bible tells us it's going to just continue this worldwide deception. So what hope is there with those who are, woefully deceived and are under the spell of these influencers that profess these things from their platforms? And many people are just eagerly taking it in.
Well, I mean, that in and of itself is a fulfillment of prophecy, because that's what Paul said. I mean, people are going to have the itching ears, and they're going to gravitate towards teachers that basically reinforce faulty presuppositions. And people like us that want to use the scripture in a way that challenges people's faulty presuppositions, the same way our own faulty presuppositions were challenged. And we thank God for it, because you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. You know, all we're trying to do is help other people with it. But the truth of the matter is, a lot of people aren't interested in that. I mean, I'm a pastor of a local church. I see it all the time. You know, people show up. If they don't get what they want from their pastor, you know, as our mutual friend Dennis Roxer likes to say, a pastor is like a piñata, someone you beat with a stick enough times so that it will throw candy your direction. I mean, that's basically a modern day pastor. You just hit him with a stick until he throws candy your direction. You know, if people don't get their presuppositions, whatever they are, Israel, you name it, immediately reinforced within 2, 3, 4 weeks, they're gone. And the church down the street, and there's plenty of them to pick from, particularly in this area, and I know in your area too, will tell them what they want to hear. And that's called church growth. And so, you know, those of us that really want to stick with the word, you know, it's kind of like spitting into the wind. I mean, we're going uphill. We're going uphill, and that's okay, because this is what we signed up for. I mean, God told us this would happen. You know, when he wrote to Timothy, 2 Timothy 3, verse 12, he gave Timothy a promise, you know, that all who seek to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted. Yeah. And 2 Timothy 3:1, in the last days there shall come perilous times. And I used to read those verses and look at the headlines till I figured out these aren't talking about the secular world. The secular world has nothing to depart from. This is talking about within the church. This is a pastoral letter. And so I guess that hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, that was really good. And I don't know if you talked about the UAP UFO disclosure in your church on Sunday or not, but I know that you are always talking about current events and bringing them. I'm sure you probably said something to the moms, you know, Happy Mother's Day. But that's really one of the things I appreciate about you so much, is that you do speak the truth. And actually, I called my show yesterday, Are You Triggered by the Truth? Because it is very triggering for people to hear, oh, there's going to be a tribulation. It's not going to be a golden age in the world getting better and better. And that maybe sounds hopeless to people, but our great hope is not in this world. It's in Jesus. But people, I guess, don't want to accept that. I actually read your paper. I think it was on 1 Timothy. Is it 1 Timothy 4 that talks about, you know, having their consciences seared with a hot iron and being forbidden to marry, and is it 1 Timothy 4? Some of these last days apostasies.
Yeah.
And you had written a paper on that, and I read that because it seems like I'm drawn into 1 and 2 Timothy, 1 and 2 Peter, looking at the world and the direction that it's going. But speaking of the world, you know, we, as you're pointing to here, we see just massive anti-Semitism, Jew hatred grips New York City. I want to play this clip for you. I've heard people call this state-sponsored media, Fox News. I mean, this isn't an endorsement for Fox. I know.
All right.
No, it is what it is. But this is just a little clip here about Mamdani broadly addressing New York City anti-Semitism efforts. Let's watch.
Let's bring in the Lawfare Project Executive Director and Human Rights Attorney, Brooke Goldstein. Brooke, great to have you on the show. I mean, we keep allowing these violent anti-Semitic protests, almost like they are now normalized, and maybe they are.
Absolutely. Thank you, Trace, for having me on and for covering this. I think that you said it perfectly right. We are at a pivotal moment right now in American history. Either we respect the rule of law, we respect civil rights, we respect Jewish civil rights and the right of people to attend houses of worship without violence and intimidation, or we are ruled by Islamist, jihadi, foreign-funded mobs connected to terrorist groups. We allow Qatar to fund our universities to the tune of billions of dollars. We allow the Muslim Brotherhood to run candidates. We allow the IRGC to fund pro-Hamas protests on our streets and on our campuses. We allow mosques to preach violence and death to Americans. This is not normal. And the leader of all of this is Mamdani. Before he was elected, he was the one in these mobs chanting to globalize the Intifada. This is not about Israel. This is about taking down America, because they hate Hindus, they hate Christians, they hate Americans, and of course they hate Jews. And the Department of Justice needs to step in and enforce the rule of law here.
You bring up Mamdani, and I want to play this because, and listen very closely, because this is Mayor Mamdani, his response to the riots. He won't specifically condemn. Instead, he kind of gives this generic, oh, please be nice to the Jews comment. Watch.
And too often, the only response offered to a hate crime is exactly that. It's a response to the hate crime. We want to also do the work of preventing those hate crimes. And as we've seen that Jewish New Yorkers constitute a minority of New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs and yet constitute a majority of New Yorkers who face hate crimes in this city. And the work we want to do is not just going to be responsive, but preventive.
I mean, the words responsive and preventive, you think the next word was going to be disruptive. What about IDing and prosecuting? Kind of, you know, a little tougher language like this has to stop.
We are witnessing an incredible amount of negligence, a monumental failure on behalf of New York State to enforce the rule of law and to prosecute people who are violating it. Mamdani himself is throwing gas on the fire. That is what he was elected to do. This is a man who believes in globalizing the Intifada. This is a man who vetoed a bill that's meant to protect Jewish school children. Mamdani should be kicked out of office. And frankly, I'll tell you one thing, these mobs, they're meant to create fear and intimidation in the Jewish community. Well, I'm sorry, we're not afraid and we're not intimidated. And anybody who was assaulted or prevented from entering that synagogue should pick up the phone today, should call the Lawfare Project. We will provide them with free legal counsel, and we will sue the organizers, the terror-connected organizers of these so-called protests, which they are not. They have nothing to do with protesting Israel. And we will get this under control.
Brooke Goldstein, great to have you on the show as always.
So a very sad week and lackluster response from the mayor. I remember at your prophecy conference, this just stays with me, how Olivier Melnick said, you know, the rats are out of the cellar. He didn't exactly say that, but the cat's out of the bag and Pandora's box is open. There's no turning back now. What are your thoughts about what's been going on with just the escalating Jewish hatred and the persecution of Jews and just the normalization of it?
Well, I mean, I'm old enough to remember when Ed Koch was the mayor of New York. You know, he was a Jewish individual. And boy, look at New York today. I mean, people need to understand what's happened there. They haven't elected a socialist. They haven't even elected just a Marxist. They've not just elected a Muslim. They've elected a jihadist, a Shiite, and a 12er. I mean, this guy thinks that the 12th Imam is going to come to the world through mass disruption, that he himself thinks he can help, you know, percolate. So this is just radicalism, you know, on steroids, what's going on in New York. This is not a new Democrat. This is not a normal Democrat. I mean, I've been following politics for a long time. I mean, one of our most anti-Israeli presidents was a guy named Jimmy Carter. And even he would not say things like Mamdani has said. You know, he was a two-state solution guy, which is bad enough. But Mamdani has articulated publicly that he doesn't even believe that the nation of Israel is an authentic, excuse me, legitimate power. And let me just throw one other thing, or legitimate state. Let me just throw one other thing in, Melissa, if I could. This kind of cuts pretty close to home. I mean, just within the last 24 hours, I got a notification on my Facebook page, ministry page. And you know how it works. Sometimes when someone puts a question or a notification, it sends you a message in Facebook Messenger. And this is what this guy said. It says, Andy, who funds your ministry? ? And some other guy kind of chimed in on there and said, yeah, good question. And my wife, who is much better detective, than I am, went and looked up who this guy was. And you don't have to scroll down far on his Facebook page. He's got a picture of high gas prices at the pump. And he's got some, sinister Jew, in the background there, making it sound like it's these evil Jews, that are, pushing up the price of gas. So the guy is just a blatant anti-Semite. We, whatever you do these days, block, unfriend, whatever we were supposed to do, we did. But, it kind of surprised me because this is a guy that's not just trashing Jews anymore. I mean, he's not just trashing people like Olivier Melnick, who you mentioned earlier. I mean, he's upset with people like us that do broadcasts and things of that nature supporting the nation of Israel. I mean, obviously, we came to these conclusions in his mind, not based on the Bible or not based on common decency and common sense, but we're being paid by the Israeli government.
Wow.
And I watched Chuck Baldwin. I don't know if you know who he is. Vitriolic, anti-Semitic guy, replacement theologian on steroids. He was being interviewed by not Rand Paul, but Ron Paul. That would be Paul Sr. And he makes a statement on there that he used to be a Zionist, he used to be a dispensationalist. He's a graduate from Jerry Falwell's Liberty University. And then just drops the statement that, Jerry Falwell used to drive me around on his airplane, which, by the way, was paid for by the Israeli government, And then you could hear Ron Paul in the background, laughing and kind of yucking it up. And he just makes this statement on this broadcast as a pastor with no receipts whatsoever. I mean, if you're going to say Jerry Falwell had an airplane from the Israeli government, should you at least give some proof? Yeah. So he's making it sound like Jerry Falwell was a Zionist because he was being paid for by the Israeli government. I mean, that's what's being the insinuation made against me and my much smaller sphere of influence. And I think these kinds of things are going to increase as we get closer to the end of the age.
Wow, unbelievable. I mean, yeah, they're coming for you, in a mid-sized church, just preaching the word, preaching the truth, doing your thing. Maybe I'll be next with my small little ministry, but it's like the world's flipping on its head. Isaiah 5:20 and dispensationalism just shrinking down to a small remnant, but I feel blessed that the truth was revealed to us. And I pray that others would come to a knowledge of the truth, but many of them just seem to be under a strong delusion. We need to take one break, Andy. We're going to come back. I do want to ask you about the Iran war and then also about this whole situation with the aliens, the pastor meeting, and the UAPs. We'll be right back on the Hope Report.
Okay. Mike Lindell here. The radical left and the deep state aren't just coming for our freedoms, they're coming after our money too. For years, they've been destroying our economy from the inside out with reckless spending, open borders, woke policies that crush our businesses. And now they've left us with an inflation disaster that's wiping out the savings of our hardworking families. They don't want us to be independent. They want us to be dependent on the government. Well, that's not going to happen on my watch. That's why I partner with American Independence Gold. It's a veteran-owned company that's helping patriotic Americans fight back by protecting our savings with real physical gold and silver. And right now they're giving away up to $15,000 in free silver and a free gold IRA kit. A portion of all the profits go to 9/11 first responders and veterans at the Tunnels to Towers Foundation. The deep state can't touch your gold, So visit MikeLindellGold.com or call 844-714-4653 right now. That's MikeLindellGold.com. Take back control. With everybody talking about making America healthy again, well, we have proudly partnered with AirWaterHealing.com and their revolutionary whole home air purification system. The V3 from Air Water Healing does 3,000 square feet of purification. It eliminates dust, mold, viruses, and odors. But here's the part I love. They require no filters to ever be changed and virtually no maintenance. That's promo code Lindell at airwaterhealing.com. You know, most people think water's just about filtration, but in reality, it's about balance. What gets removed, what gets left behind, and how the water actually behaves once you drink it. Well, many traditional systems focus on one thing, removal. Reverse osmosis, for example, strips water down completely. It may sound ideal, but it removes minerals that our bodies need. The Century Wellness System was designed with a different philosophy. It removes common contaminants like chlorine, fluoride, and PFAS, while restoring key minerals like magnesium and improving alkalinity. It also does all this without tanks and without wastewater, and without requiring a complicated installation. It installs in about 15 minutes under your sink, so instead of overcorrecting, it brings your water back into balance. Please visit CenturyH2O.com and use promo code Lindell for 10% off your next purchase.
Welcome back to the Hope Report. I'm here with Dr. Andy Woods of Sugarland Bible Church, andywoodsministries.org, and we've covered anti-Semitism a bit today and also Israel. We've got like 19 minutes left. The time always flies with you, Andy. I do want to get your take on the war in Iran and also the alien disclosure, if you want to call it that. But the war in Iran, I know that people have different opinions about this and how it's going. And actually, our friend Sharam Hadian is here in Minnesota. He's doing a presentation on Iran, and I'm excited. I'm going to see him on Saturday afternoon. So he has some strong feelings about it, and it was supposed to be quick and decisive, and maybe in terms of war, it hasn't gone on that long, but some of the objectives, the regime change, no nuclear weapons, open the strait. I think some people are starting to, lose hope or wonder what's going on here. So how do you think it's going, and what do you think is the best case scenario moving forward?
Well, I mean, just coming from a human perspective, I'm a supporter of Trump, and I was happy that he is doing what he's doing. I mean, I agree with him that it's a fascist neo-Nazi regime, that chants death to the great Satan, us, and death to the little Satan, Israel, around the clock, and letting these people get their hands on weapons of mass destruction is just unacceptable. They're 12ers, as I mentioned before, with Mom Donnie, and they believe they can bring the 12th imam to the world through causing disruption in the world. And so how do you let people like that get their hands on nuclear weapons of mass destruction? So I guess from that angle, I'm happy with what the president is doing. I hope he stays until the job is done, because I don't want my children and grandchildren to have to fight this battle. However, if you want me to put my prophecy hat on for a minute, that was my political hat. My prophecy hat tells me that Iran isn't going anywhere. And I think the key thing to watch in this whole thing is Russia. Russia has been providing Iran with intel. There was just a general that came out. I saw an article about it today, indicating that Russia is backing Iran, and so is China, for that matter. So I guess my take on it is what Iran is experiencing right now is kind of like, I guess I would analogize it to Operation Midnight Hammer, where we were told, oh, we went in and we just took out this and we took out that. Well, if we did such a great job, why Operation Epic Fury to follow? So obviously Operation Midnight Hammer was exaggerated beyond what the facts dictate. And I kind of feel that way about Operation Epic Fury. I just think they're going to be resupplied by Russia. Iran is not going anywhere. And the reason I say that is she is one of the principal players in the infamous Gog-Magog invasion described in Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's like people told me when the Soviet Union fell, hey, it's going to be great now. You know, we've got glasnost and perestroika and Mikhail Gorbachev. And I remember this was all happening when I was back in college. I would try to argue with some of my dorm mates, classmates, etc. Not so fast. Look at Ezekiel 38 and 39. I mean, Russia is a player that will invade Israel in the last days. She's not going anywhere. And of course, over the course of time, I was vindicated because the Russian bear woke up in 2008 and rolled right over neighboring Georgia. And then after that, 2014, they rolled right over Crimea. And we've seen what has happened within the last couple of years related to Ukraine. And so just like Russia never disappeared, like we were told, I sense the same thing is going to happen with Iran or Persia. And I want to be clear, I'm not condemning the Persian people, you know, beautiful people. I'm condemning here the demonic presence that I believe is over the regime of Iran. And you'll actually find a reference to that demonic presence in Daniel chapter 10, around verses 12 and 13. It's the prince over Persia. And so since there's a demon over Persia or Iran, I don't expect any big time reformation to take place in Iran.
Yeah, I believe, wasn't that where Daniel prayed and his prayer was blocked for 21 days from the
Right.
spirit prince? I feel like there's a principality over Minnesota as well. But I like how you made that distinction between politics and prophecy, because I agree with you. I appreciate the president going in and doing what he did and actually making good on what he promised to do. And, 40,000 plus people being murdered and nobody is saying anything. These people that are crying genocide about what's happening. It's just so, it's unfathomable. But so Andy, with our 12, 14 minutes left, of course, I've got to ask you about this aliens, demons, Nephilim. And I was thinking about this. I saw a clip. I don't have time to play it, but I don't know if you know who David Harris Jr. is. I used to think he was somewhat of a level-headed conservative, but he did an interview with Paula White, and he gave her a platform. And Paula was saying, there was no pastors meeting. This never happened. This didn't happen. And then we've got Larry Ragland. I'm not putting them on, opposite. Well, I don't know what I'm doing with them. I'm putting you in the middle as a factual, sensible, pragmatic person. And Larry is a nice guy. I've told you I know Larry, and I think he has a good heart. I don't think he's lying. But he gets really into maybe a little bit of the conspiracy side of things. And I'm going to play this clip of Larry, and then I want you to share what happened to you and react to this. But what he's saying here is pastors were urged to prepare. And then he talks about an actual meeting they had with this legislator. Let's watch.
Fellow pastors are invited to come to a private meeting with a group of men who are connected with the intelligence world that are believers, but are still have very high security clearance. These are legit, true men of God that are still connected to Washington and even this current administration and all branches of the military. And they literally told us, we had a sitting congressman, a very well-known congressman from Missouri. He called into that meeting as well. That was just for pastors. And this is what he said. On speakerphone, this sitting powerful member of Congress said, "Are the pastors listening to me?" I'm getting chills right now because this happened to me. He said, "Are the pastors in the room listening to me?" And I said, "Yes, sir, we are here." And he said, "Listen to me. Go and tell the church they are not ready for what is coming. The narrative that is coming, what they are going to say is going to be like nothing you can even imagine. They are preparing to tell us that they are from another dimension, that they are our creator, and that these beings, these aliens, or whatever you want to call them, they were the ones that seeded us here. There is no such thing as God. Jesus was invented by them. The Bible was invented by them." And begin to just say, listen, prepare the people for what is coming because they're not ready. But he loved us so much. He made sure that he told us exactly the blueprint to study. He said, study the days of Noah. And if you can understand how Noah responded, that's how you're going to have to respond. And I believe what God is doing in the body of Christ right now.
It sounds like science fiction, I don't know what to make of it, but I know you had someone reach out to you a couple of years ago. So what are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, I've been on 2 broadcasts lately, and people can find these. One is Brandon's show that's already been published, and one is something I did with James Cadiz earlier. Oh, what was it? This week or last week, I think, that will be published, I think, a day after our interview here, which I think you said is coming out on Friday. By the time that comes out, people will be able to see this interview I did with James Cadiz. And they brought this up, and I was not something I've been following. I've been busy with other stuff. But as I became aware of this, I said on both of those interviews that I believe this happened. Maybe these pastors are hyperbolizing things a little bit. I don't know. But the conversation that they're talking about, I believe happened because something very similar happened to me where someone in military, contacted me and sent me an email. We spoke on the phone. They sent me their credentials, their resume. I mean, to me, it all looked above board. And I had forgotten about this. And this conversation I had on these recent shows brought these things back to memory. But this would go back to, and I looked up the date of this email, August 9th, 2024. And sort of the heart and soul of the conversation was after the election, because remember, Biden and Trump were running against each other at that time. Maybe by then Biden had dropped out and Harris was running against Trump. Whatever the case may be, the gist of the conversation was, once this election is over, there's going to be some disclosures related to UFOs. And the person talking to me seemed to indicate that it would deal with a lot of paranormal stuff. And he had reached out to me as a pastor and other pastors to explain, be prepared to give a biblical explanation for the paranormal, UFOs, when they come out in these films and whatnot and things that are going to be released. And he expressed some concern that the church really wasn't ready, to hear something like that. And so, I gave him my understanding of UFOs, which is basically that God is not the only miracle worker in the universe. There's the fallen angelic realm that can work miracles as well. They don't work miracles on par with God, but they can perform signs and wonders. I mean, just read Exodus 7 and 8, and you'll see there that Pharaoh's magicians were able to imitate the miracles brought by Moses and Aaron up to a point. So there is a reservoir of miracle working power in the fallen angelic realm. And so therefore they can create all kinds of artificial signs and wonders. And this is why we're told over and over again in the Bible that we don't determine truth by an experience, because Satan can give experiences, as can the demons. We determine truth by, does it line up with Scripture? And so I believe that this conversation that you're airing here with Mr. Ragland, I think it actually did happen. And I think there are people in the government that are worried that Christianity could be undermined if people are exposed to the reality of these signs and wonders without a biblical mooring. And so he was trying to figure out, where do I stand on this? What do I think about this? He really liked my explanation of UFOs. And he just wanted me to be in a position to give this explanation when these disclosures, came out. And I told him, you know what? I talk about these things anyway, whether there's going to be UFO disclosures or not. I tell people all the time, the supernatural world is real. And don't believe something is true just because it's supernatural. Paul is very clear in Galatians chapter 1, that if we or an angel preaches unto you a gospel that you've never been taught before, let him be accursed. So an angel could show up and preach something contrary to the Bible. And when that angel does that, you know that it's a Satan, an angel masquerading as an angel of light. Hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that, having had that experience, I think brings a lot of credibility to the conversation and sensibility. And I'm happy to hear you say that, because it has been sensationalized to some degree. And it's actually kind of surprising Paula White was so adamant about none of this happening. So I'm wondering, we've got a few minutes left, but first of all, I find it hard to believe that Christians would fall for this, but maybe I'm just, because I'm in the Bible and I'm trying to be a good disciple. Do you see people actually being deluded? And then also, what was the other thing I was going to ask you? What do you make of what's been released? I mean, have you gone through it at all? From what I understand, I thought it was a little funny. The president said, I'm just going to release it all and you can figure out whatever the H you think about it, or something like that. Just like it made me chuckle. Putting it all out there. Do you think this was a positive thing, or is it just kind of like it's not really, showing anything?
Well, I mean, can Christians be deceived by this? Yes. I mean, there's a whole sector within Christendom where everything is experiential and signs and wonders.
Right.
And so that group is like a sitting duck for this kind of thing. These kind of things, what I watched the Sean Hannity show, and he played a little bit of it. It reminded me of things that I would see when I was very young on that show where Leonard Nimoy was the narrator.
Yes.
And it was, it was always dealing with the Loch Ness monster, or these Bigfoot or whatever.
Bigfoot.
And he had a unit there on UFOs, and he had videos and things of strange occurrences in the sky. So what I saw on the Sean Hannity show was sort of akin to that. It was not some sweeping thing, but even if it was, it wouldn't change my faith at all, because I have an angelology, a doctrine of angels that accommodates this kind of thing. If I didn't have a proper angelology where Satan and the demons are miracle workers also, then I would be a sitting duck for it. And I agree with this fellow that contacted me that pastors need to be in a position to explain these things to people, or they're going to be swept away by deception.
Right. And I know you have that angelology series. I haven't dipped into that yet. I've gone through much of your materials, as you know, and just finished the Babylon book. And thank you for these books. We're going to start this Sunday night on Lindell TV, 7 p.m. Central. Also, Hope Report YouTube channel. If you guys want to give me a subscribe, that would be great. But Andy, in our last couple minutes, I want to ask you, just what would you advise Christians, or maybe it's people who are, they're convinced that Israel is the enemy, or they're listening to these TikTok people. What would be, maybe they are believing Christians and they don't see any problem in what they're doing. What would be your advice to them, people that are most susceptible to being deceived?
Well, the only defense you have against deception is God's word, the sword of the Spirit. Jesus was confronted with 3 mind-bending temptations in the wilderness, and he responded each time with "it is written," from the book of Deuteronomy, of all books. Most Christians have never even read the book of Deuteronomy, and yet Jesus felt that what was in Deuteronomy was sufficient to ward off deception. And that's we've used the analogy many times of counterfeit money. You can't you become familiar with the real currency. And when, its texture, its color, what it feels like, even what it smells like. And when the false runs across your hand, something's off, because you're so familiar with the real. And it's impossible to be an expert in every area of deception. I mean, if I was going to become an expert in one area, it would take my whole life to do it. I can't do it, but God says you can be familiar with these 66 books. That you can do because it's a finite revelation. And the more you're familiar with that, the more when the funny stuff, funny money, runs across your screen or whatnot, you can say, that doesn't look right. That doesn't sound right. I don't think that is right. But you have no ability to do that unless you're familiar with the real. So the more time you spend soaking in the word, the better off you're going to be.
That is great advice. I love that. In a world that may feel out of control, you can manage those 66 books of the Bible. So be spending more time in that than in the podcasters, YouTubers, TikTok theology. That's my thoughts on it. Well, Andy, we're already out of time, but andywoodsministries.org is Andy's website. He has an amazing AI tool. I'm sure you hear me talk about it every day. I mean, I hope you don't mind that I'm mentioning you like 5 times a day, but you have taught me so much through your scholarship and the free resources and the AI tool, askandy.andywoodsministries.org. So thank you so much for being on the Hope Report.
Great to be here, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
All right. God bless. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Join me Monday. We will have Annie Cyrus on the show. God bless.